Now, moving out from here, we're going to take this from a second and look at it from a theological perspective, because, as I said, we're going back to the book of Bible, the Old and New Testament, and we're going to look at some elements here, both in Judaism and later in Christianity, some elements that are really central to their faith and to the whole of their faith. That if you pull them out, if you told them to cut these parts out because they were racist, their entire theology, everything would collapse. And to start with, we'll just look at the idea of, well, certain ideas that are emergent from what's been set up by God in what's contained in the Bible. Now, clearly, critics of theology and of the Bible, such as Dawkins and this, will simplify things, I believe, to an absurd degree, because they've removed things from context, and so you get these things that are absurd. If anybody has seen the whole magic bullet and the Kennedy assassination, and they'll say, oh, well, they believe that the bullet went this way and that way and then entered in here. Well, when they're just presenting it in the wrong context. But moving on, if you're looking at things in the proper context, there is a rhyme and a reason to all of this. And I believe, our brethren in the Jewish faith and in the Christian faith that are not of our specific faith, but still believe in Christ or believe in Jehovah, I just want to demonstrate some of these concepts. So, if you'll follow me for a second, we look at the idea of in fact, arguably the central, outside of God, of course, but the central figures of the Old Testament is, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, commonly referred to as the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. The whole idea of a chosen people, even if you get into Islam and you think it's going a different branch, it's still this idea of originating in a father, in this family from which God works through this family, and the concept of a chosen people. The idea of taking and setting a people apart. Even if you go back and you look at, say, Genesis 11, for example, where it says, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Now, I'm going to take this and kind of demonstrate something, and I hope that this can be seen for what I believe it is, at least by my theistic brethren, and even those who are not of the theistic persuasion, our atheist and agnostic friends, if they could look at this in the context of cultivating, again, the idea of culture and directing things, which even if you believe it only is emergent from natural selection, it's still something that's emergent, and so what you arrive at today is what's been the best at surviving for however long you want to see things as going on. So, if you look at this, God's presenting, he says, all these people, they're one language, they're one. And evidently, in this point, it's a problem for God. The fact that everybody's one. And why is that a problem? Well, if you look at it, if you have, just one single plant that you've planted in a field, for example, in agriculture, hopefully this would be something you could consider. Or take our environmentalists and our friends, animal activists. When you take a whole bunch of chickens of the same breed and you stuff them into, a cloistered area and you're feeding them and you're just constantly doing that, what happens? Well, you get diseases, you get all different toxins and things, and so once you get one pathogen, if everything's one, the pathogen spreads through the whole, and you either have to have the whole thing so drugged up that it's absurd, which is kind of where agriculture is today, or it's always this precarious thing, because you've got, if it's such a homogeneous group, if it's so one, then the moment a corruption enters in, the corruption spreads throughout. really rapidly and just decimates. Of course, this is something that you would see as driving evolution, but look at this, the idea of taking a people and then also making all their languages confused. That may seem, from if you took it out of context, but in context, it's God protecting the people from themselves. It's making it so that the transmission of these corruptions, these corrupt means, which can lead to destructive things, it's inhibiting that. And so the idea of this happening, of changing the language, of confounding the languages of the people of the earth and scattering the people of the earth, on one hand, yes, it is limiting. But if you look at it from either perspective, either theistic or non-theistic perspective, it would be an event that would enhance the whole of humanity's capacity to, And moving on from this, then we get the idea of a family, of God choosing a family, because again, in the view of many, and that's one of the key critiques by the likes of Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris of the concept of an Old Testament God is, oh my word, look at what a racist, and what a God that's choosing people here and cursing people here, how horrible. And on the outside and the exterior, they have a point, because a God that's supposed to be impartial, I mean, what sense would that make? But moving on from there, I'm going to come back to that whole partial and impartiality, so hold on to that one too. And again, I'm sorry that we're bouncing around so much, but we take and we look at this with regard to these kind of things. And so we have the central figures, again, getting back to this, the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the house of Israel. And again, if you want to go the Muslim and Islamic route, then the other side of Abraham's family. But the idea of God taking and using a people for a purpose, and then calling them the chosen people, a blessed people, there's something to this. Now we're going to delve a bit deeper into the idea of the patriarchs and their history a bit. So if you look for a second, I mean, you go from Abraham, and Abraham, of course, having two wives, having Isaac and Ishmael. And the interesting thing is that they were both firstborns, since there was plural marriage. Ishmael was a firstborn, and so was Isaac. That's just kind of an interesting side note, but then we go from Ishmael and Isaac, and then from Isaac, you go in verse 23 of chapter 25 of Genesis. And the Lord said unto her, this is Rebekah, he says, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. Again, this idea of separating and setting things apart. 1 people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So we've got this whole idea of servitude and seniority, and this whole echelon and setup of a pecking order. And again, I know that the secularists will go off and holler about this and use this as their proof that if it is a God, it's not the God of the Bible. But again, that's the problem with taking it out of context. And so from this proceeds the idea of you get Abraham, Isaac, and then you're down to Jacob and I'm trying to blank. Jacob and Esau. And so they come out, and Jacob grabs onto Esau's heel, and Jacob, the name means usurper, so it's this younger one that ends up taking the place. In some views stealing, in other views purchasing, and then just conniving his way and getting the birthright. And so it's this idea, again, of God choosing one and setting one above another. And we find this even later when you get Jacob, or whose name changed to Israel. He has his sons, and one of them, Joseph, has 2